Hello, dear friends, and welcome to Chapter 4 of the Dialogues. And this is a pretty exciting chapter. It's called The New You. Who doesn't want a new you? So I apologize for all of the text on this slide, but I just really wanted to go into some of this stuff. So what's happening now is the fulfillment of the covenant between you and God. So covenant is like an agreement, something that you set up in advance. So as you become new, everything changes. God changes, the world changes, other selves change. How is this possible? Because there is only one. So as there is only one, as you have your experience of coming into the new you, which is a wonderful, amazing time, then everything else that you are associated with changes with you because of this oneness. In verse 2, in unity you are whole and inseparable, one living organism, now raised above the level of the organism. As you become aware of the unity of form. So that verse says a lot. So the first thing it tells us is that you're whole and inseparable, one living organism. We have assumed the belief that we were 7 billion different living organisms. That's not even counting plants, trees, animals. That's just counting the people that are living on this earth right now. And as we were living as a separated being, we really thought of ourselves as a separated living organism. And now we recognize that there's really only one living organism. Now raised above the level of the organism, as you become aware of the unity of form. So this is telling us that this form experience that we are having is also one. So the organism is having an experience of form, and it's all one. So try not to use your mind completely to wrap around that, but use your heart. As you drop your identification as a separated being, you recognize there's only ever been one. And this opens your prison door. So as you identified it as being this separated being, I'm over here and you're over there, and we are different, we are not one, we are separated from each other, I'm separated from everyone and everything else. That's what keeps us in prison, because it's not true. Because, what's the whole purpose of a prison? Is to lock you away from society, to keep you separated from society. And that is the purpose of the personal self, to keep you separated so that you are not joining in and living in your oneness. But when you drop your identification as a separated being, your prison door becomes open. And you have done this throughout a course of love, when you've had those times when you've really experienced your oneness with everything, and when your heart has been open. And so that is what has precipitated this. And this too is a fulfillment of the covenant. Because the covenant was, part of the covenant was your entering into form, and part of the covenant is you recognizing your oneness and coming back into the full design of being in form, of the one experiencing in form. And that's what this fulfillment is. So it was only your personal self that's been imprisoned. Your consciousness, the one consciousness, has never been imprisoned. But as long as you identify as being the personal self, when you think I'm a separate being, you're at the mercy of the collective, all the ideas and the values and the structures of the collective, and you're subject to the laws of man. And we know how that goes, and we know how vulnerable we feel when we're in that space, just as I'm sure someone feels when they're in prison. There's really no control. You're completely vulnerable. Anything can happen to you, and it usually does. And that's the same that we've been experiencing when we've been identifying as a separate self. So entering Christ consciousness means experiencing oneness while still in the experience of form. So the oneness was easy for the one to experience without the world of form. We came into the world of form to have this experience, and then when we were identified with the thought construct of the ego, then we completely felt separated from everyone else, and we forgot our oneness. So this is really only the personal self that was imprisoned. So who are we letting out of the prison? The personal self. Because even though we experience and know our oneness as Christ consciousness, we're still having what appears to be an individuated experience. Notice I said appears to be. But that continues because that's the way form has been set up. So we are freeing the personal self so that the personal self knows its oneness, and we can actually live in the world as the Christ, remembering who we are and remembering what's actually happening here. Now, just as when a convict is released from real prison, the world's prison, there's an adjustment period when one is released from prison, just like you. When your personal self has been imprisoned and you are now out of prison and you know that you're one, not just as a thought construct, but you've had the experience of oneness, then there's an adjustment period. Like, how do I do this? How do I still live in form when everything appears to be separate? That glass appears to be over there and I appear to be over here. How do we do this? How do I keep myself out of the prison of the personal self? That's the task that's at hand right now. It's easy enough to experience my oneness when I'm in a deep meditation, but what about when I'm at the grocery store, or I'm at work, or I'm parenting a screaming 2-year-old? How do I live in oneness then? So instead of a life that's artificially structured, which is what you had when you were in prison, because all of the concepts and all of the laws of the way the world worked, if you will, were all laid out for you through the collective mental construct that was artificially structured. Just as in prison, life is artificially structured. You're told when to get up, when to go to bed. You're given the food that you're going to eat. You have very, very little freedom. When you are living as a personal self who thinks that he or she is separate, you also have very little freedom. So now you replace it with a life that is internally structured. We're going to get into that a little bit more. So we move to talking about divine thought patterns, which, who knew thought patterns were part of divinity at all? But we had to have divine thought patterns in order to have the experience of form. So it's divine thought patterns caused your experience of form, and they are also causing your return to your true identity. So these thought patterns were both external, I've given a couple of examples here, as in the unity of nature. I mean, how many people say nature is my church? Experiencing the beauty and the unity of nature and how it works in cooperation, and how animals and plants just accept whatever is happening and just live and grow, and they don't seem to be obsessed with suffering as humans do. And internal thought patterns. And a divine internal thought pattern was the thought pattern of learning. So learning was actually set up for the experience of form, including learning from contrast, just really getting down into the nitty-gritty of the form experience itself. But now that we have moved out of prison, we are replacing the thought pattern of learning with the thought pattern of acceptance. And this replacement will sustain your freedom. So they talk a bit in the text about how some cons, and of course we've seen stories of this and heard about it, that some convicts who've been in prison for so long, when they get out in the big wide world, aren't comfortable. And they don't know where they fit, and they don't know the rules, and it feels really insecure. And sometimes they do something that causes them to go back into prison, because at least they felt safe there. There are some admonishments in the text, like, don't do that to yourself. Don't let your fear of not knowing how it works out here to cause you to go scurrying back to your prison cell of being the separated self. Now, we need to look again at the idea of a thought pattern. So the thought pattern of learning is deeply entrenched. It's something that we have been working with since we can remember as an individualized being. So now replacing learning with acceptance, it's going to require some new thought patterns. It's going to require your decision to do the work. Just like a convict who gets out of prison has to decide, I'm really going to give this my best shot. I don't want to go back to prison. I want to figure out how to make it in a world that's free. So too must you make that kind of commitment so that you can actually make that transition to freedom, and that becomes your anchored place, your home, rather than the prison of the personal self. Verse 18 tells us, all we are left with is what was given. These are the original divine thought patterns. A divine universe, a divine existence. That divine universe is now recreating the patterns that served the time of learning. So this is where the new you happens, because you're leaving behind the patterns of old. In the instant you came to know yourself, capital S, your one self, learning was accomplished. It was finished. You completed the assignment. It did what it needed to do. And the new structure of acceptance will meet your needs now that you are out of prison. And if you're not exactly sure what that means, just hang in there. As we continue to go through the dialogues, we'll go into this more and more, and the 40 days and 40 nights goes into it more and more, and we'll talk about it more here today as well. This time of acceptance is not your final destination, but it serves as a kind of halfway house to freedom. And that statement is mine. It didn't come from the text, because it tells us later on that something else will come next. But the time of acceptance is really the only thing you have to worry about right now. And you're going to practice that in many ways many times, but it's the thing to kind of anchor to at this point. So you begin your acceptance. Here you're given instructions on where to start by accepting your own internal authority. So now instead of, let's take something simple like, how do I want to dress today? That's pretty basic. Rather than using the old patterns as your cue, like, oh, I got a lot of compliments on this when I wore it, or this will make me fulfill an image that I'd like to fulfill today, or instead you look to your internal authority to say, okay, how do I want to feel today? What expresses what I'm feeling? What expresses how I want to feel as I go throughout my day? What feels good on my skin? What do I feel good when I'm in? What is in my highest good? I mean, it doesn't get any more simple than that decision. But it's an example of a way for you to accept your own internal authority as you go through your day and go through your life. So the only teachings and teachers that are useful now to you are those that lead you to deeper self-inquiry. So this is important because we have spent how long looking to external authorities who maybe have it figured out better than we do to tell us, where is happiness anyway? How can I find it? How can I fix this problem? How can I change this about myself? How can I make a better life for myself? Going to those kinds of outside authorities. And so from this point on, the only teachers you should be listening to are those that help you explore yourself more. Find out more about what's actually true for me. What is my experience like? Those that lead you to self-inquiry and self-examination. So whatever imprisons you must be left behind. So this requires self-examination. That's why those teachers and teachings are the only ones that still serve you. Because we have lots of old beliefs and fears and opinions, and we have a tendency to cling to things that make us feel safe. So whatever you discover as you're accepting yourself, and this includes accepting your feelings, accepting your thoughts, accepting whatever happens to you, accepting your responses, just accepting. And as you accept, it will allow your feelings to come forward, and that's going to reveal a lot to you. So basically, even though your prison door is open and you've walked out of prison, we've still got a lot of deconstructing to do. And these things are going to lead the way. Acceptance is going to lead the way. And as I said, this will require self-inquiry and examination because only you can choose freedom. Nobody can do it for you. Nobody can identify this for you and undo this for you. This is, you are getting back more and more of your own free will. And as you retrieve more of your own free will, then you have the choice to use it to become freer. Because really, that's what we're doing here. We are really freeing ourselves from this self-constructed prison. So it won't be claimed for you, even as much as you love Jesus. Jesus can't do it for you, and neither can your mother or your spouse or anybody else. You have to do this. You must look and see what still holds you and choose to release what no longer serves you. So that's kind of the journey that we're on. Verse 30 tells us, as you've been returned to yourself, now your life must be returned to where it fits within the divine design, to where it is a life of meaning and purpose. And so even though this sounds like a lot of work, it will not bring suffering. You're not going to have to go into some deep, dark cave and analyze everything that's ever happened to you and root out your past. And it's going to end your suffering. Believe me. Just at this point, just simply invite into your life whatever brings you joy, whatever you resonate with, whatever, like with the example of getting dressed in the morning, what would bring me joy to wear today? And then you accept what is. You accept yourself. You accept whatever happens. So that's your starting point. And actually, that's a great practice by itself. It should keep you happy for a long time, mastering those two things. Invite what brings you joy and accept whatever is. There is only one answer. And that answer begins with complete and total acceptance of yourself. So that is the road to the new self. Thank you for joining me. I look forward to talking with you again in Chapter 5.